I think the big thing and the interesting thing was talking about the quarterback position for the Cowboys, because quarterback is such an outsized role in football. And so it really does make a big impact in things. And as of right now, the Cowboys have not gotten things done. And there's a lot of people that have criticism for the quarterback of these Dallas Cowboys. And so there is conversations about Dak Prescott. And would you rather start there, or would you rather start with the hypothetical?
The hypothetical about
this draft, right? Because we got the draft coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's start with the hypothetical first, and then it's this, because that's a nice little tease about the quarterback, and then we'll get into that.
That's right. And so Florio had an interesting take on the Cowboys and maybe the way that they should handle the quarterback situation, which is in part maybe you should draft a quarterback. So here, cut 7 for me, Justin. This is Florio laying out his case as to why maybe the Cowboys.
Little John.
What? Yeah, maybe why the Cowboys should draft a quarterback.
The Cowboys have an aging team in a lot of key areas. They had a great offensive line for a long time. How much longer is Zach Martin going to be there? You know, the offensive line isn't as great as it was in its heyday. You have to make that better. You have to deal with the defensive line. DeMarcus Lawrence has been around, 11 years now. And I think if you're not going to have Dak Prescott in 2025, well, and you don't know that you're not going to have him, but you have to plan for the possibility that you don't. We don't know what they think of Trey Lance. There haven't been a lot of leaks that they love Trey Lance and they think Trey Lance could be a starter. If they don't think Trey Lance can take over, they better have somebody that they're getting ready to go for 2025 at the quarterback position.
Let me tell you something. I'm going to go ahead and discourage people believing that Mike Florio is making sense on this, because we've had Jerry Jones on this station ad nauseum over the years. And back when Tony Romo was always getting hurt, and it's like, well, you better start drafting a quarterback because who knows how long Romo might play. Jerry would always say this. The Cowboys are, I'm paraphrasing here, they draft a quarterback adverse. He says you do not have good odds if you select the wrong quarterback. And think about it. Their greatest quarterbacks with Jerry Jones, Troy Aikman, drafted with the #1 pick in the draft. Tony Romo, not drafted. Dak Prescott, 4th round supplemental pick. He has a fear of getting it wrong. I don't think he'd ever use the draft to get a quarterback because he doesn't like his odds.
And that's fair, right? And so I think that's why let's position as should they, right? Because will they? It feels very obvious. That's a big no, right?
Correct.
That can lean into the Dak Prescott of this all, because it points to a consistent problem that the Cowboys have had with the ways that their MO, their modus operandi, with how they've gone about things, which is waiting and kind of allowing things to happen to them as opposed to kind of shaping the way that
especially
these
with big
negotiations
name contracts. Yeah.
But ultimately, it's an interesting concept, and of course, this is all theoretical because that's where we are. But should they? Do you think that would be a good idea? 877-881-1053, and we have a couple of different ideas on the text line from the 817. They said if Dak agreed to a trade, they trade up for a pick, and so that sounds like no, because one of the things that's very evident, Dak Prescott has all
the leverage.
100% of the leverage in this situation.
All of it, like he did last time.
And that leans into what I was talking about the Cowboys. Like, the Cowboys have set themselves back in this situation time and time again, and it's compounded upon each other, right? Florio was mentioning this as well, but it's not anything that's unknown. You had the rookie, you had him on the rookie deal. You had the opportunity once it was very apparent that he was going to be the quarterback that took over this thing. Sign him up long term. They waited.
And waited.
They waited.
And waited.
And we had to have all these conversations on air. Yes, I'm still mad at it. We had to talk about the contract. Yeah. Will they? Won't they? Franchise tag.
The longer you wait, the more you pay for a quarterback.
And they got to the point where they just got locked in. They had to give him a contract in that situation. Because
and they had to give the contract that he wanted. And he's got a contract where he decides where he's going to go and whether he stays.
Because there's no opportunity to franchise tag him after this. That was written into the contract. He cannot be. He has a no trade clause. So unless he waives that, you have very little opportunity.
And you can't franchise tag him either.
Yes.
He's got that in writing.
Absolutely. And so all that you have is either give him a deal that he's willing to say yes to, which is a deal that he can't refuse. And as you continue to move closer to the end of this contract, it behooves Dak Prescott to not make a deal, because you can get to free agency. And when you get to that place, you have a lot of power.
And decide to stay or not. Seriously. Period. Point blank. So with that being said, back to your question, should the Cowboys draft a quarterback? I actually believe Jerry Jones, because to me, who would have not drafted Patrick Mahomes #1 overall in the draft if he had to do it over, correct? Sure. Instead, he barely made it in the top 10 because they thought he was a system quarterback. I could go on and on and on with the guys who missed. I'm just giving you the guy that was a great pick for Kansas City.
Yeah.
With that being said, look at all the different quarterbacks who have not worked out.
100%.
And that's why it's a roll of the dice, a significant roll of the dice. And sometimes fans in particular, they think a draft pick, period, a first-round draft pick is gold. Well, it's gold if you use it right. If you use it wrong, you screwed it up.
Yeah, but I think
even if you say, well, on paper, everything about this kid says it should work. Well, guess what? It don't always work out that way.
Right. But I think all of this comes back around to the idea that you're setting up for an offseason next year where the quarterback has the opportunity to walk away, and your only real recourse is go with Trey Lance and hope that he's together. And I think that's what Florio was speaking to, is we haven't had rumors that he has been good.
Good or bad,
Now, one thing I will say about that is that was the way that I looked at Jordan Love. Because you recall, Green Bay has done this multiple times, and the last time they did this was drafting Jordan Love.
Right.
And
they did it with Aaron Rodgers, too.
Right. And for me, the question I had was, is Jordan Love good?
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of ways to know that when he is not playing NFL football games. We're not close enough to be able to see any of those things. But usually the way that in my mind it goes is you should start hearing rumors of this guy is good. They like this guy.
That's what happened with Romo. Romo was so good in practice that Bill Parcells said, I hate to do this, but I'm going to start this guy in the middle of the game. And he switched quarterbacks in the middle of the game. I'll never forget it because I was at that game.
And so we had not heard those whispers, and so I was like, so maybe Jordan Love isn't that good. And they got in there, and he's been pretty good. And some of that I imagine is circumstance, because that's the way that I'm coming to believe when it comes to quarterback, that circumstance plays a decent amount into it, especially early. But some of that is just, it seems like the Green Bay Packers understood, we can keep this quiet, especially understanding who their starting quarterback was at that point and not making him mad, right? I think that, so there's a possibility that maybe Trey Lance has developed to a place where the Cowboys like him. I'm not willing to gamble on that. And if you are in that place where you look at it and Dak Prescott very well could leave at the end of the season in free agency, right? Okay. If you don't have anything with Trey Lance, I think that basically leans in, are you actually going to have a 2024 season that you feel like you can really and truly compete? Because you have a limited draft capital, and I feel like in order to do this, if you want to draft a quarterback that you think has a chance, you have to draft him day one, at the very latest day two, right? Those are picks that are going to be necessary to make your team as good as possible to try and compete this year. So you have to make a decision one way or the other in a way. Are you going to draft for this year, or are you going to try and maybe draft a potential quarterback to give you an option in 2025 and beyond?
Everything you're saying makes sense. I don't believe in drafting quarterbacks if you've got one that's already very, very good and he's only 30 years old, going to be 31 this summer.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that. And part of the reason it's no different than just knowing that the Cowboys aren't going after a free agent the first week of free agency. That's not in their DNA. They're not going to do it anyway. And so I'm not going to use that phrase that Jerry used earlier, but
I'm sick of it.
But if you're trying to win a Super Bowl, and they claim every year, that's our pedigree. We're a team that our birthright, go to the Super Bowl. If you're trying every year to do that, that is not what you do when you need to fortify a roster that you lost a whole bunch of backups and some starters. That's not what you do.
Sure.
In other words, even if you had fortified it with free agency and a couple of trades by now, like you did last year, I could say, maybe you had a pick you might want to take. Okay, maybe. It's not about Dak's situation. It's about, are you going to make a run or not? And even if you waste a quote-unquote pick to develop a quarterback, you're wasting this year anyway. I'm like, wait a minute. You're showing everybody you're wasting the year.
And that's a great point. And honestly, I think that the reason why I would lean to no, you do not draft a quarterback is, again, you don't know what you have in Trey Lance.
You have no idea.
Someone was talking about, and I will make this connect. I want you to follow me on this. Someone was talking about on the text line the idea that Dak Prescott doesn't have leverage. He's playing for a job here. You can move on with no real cost after this year. Actually, no, you cannot. You'll move on, but that's not your choice. You were still eating dead cat because of those void years on the back end.
You're still going to be paying for Dak Prescott whether he's here or not. It's just like Ezekiel Elliott. So if you think, okay, just let Dak go, guess what? You're still paying $50-something million.
Yeah, there's a lot of dead money. There's a lot of dead money in that 2025 season when he will be a free agent and go and play somewhere else.
And you get nothing but compensatory picks.
But I think that also plays in, right? You have the opportunity to then play Trey Lance. And if it goes well, there you go. Trey Lance is your quarterback. You move on from there. If it doesn't go well, Well, buddy,
that's what I'm saying. This whole thing is so.
But if you are in that end game of 2025, where new head coach Trey Lance C, and if he is not there, if he's not good, likelihood is you are really not good, right, as a team, and you put yourself in a better circumstance to maybe take one of those darts, one of those flyers, one of those swings at a quarterback that you can now restart the cycle.
I'm going to tell you something. That will never happen, and I'm going to tell you why. Jerry lived through the 5 and 11. Jerry and Steve both lived through the 5 and 11 Campo days. The years where they didn't know Tony Romo was going to be in their future. It looked like it would never end. That's why he hired Bill Parcells.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. You can say a lot of people who like to play with draft picks and like to play with fantasy football and build their teams. Why do you think this team is the most valuable franchise in the world? Because they want to be mid at worst. Mid at worst. And the only reason they were terrible in 2020, I believe it was, is because Dak broke his ankle. That was the only reason. And that's just a wash because it's a pandemic year anyway. That's the only reason why they were able to draft Micah Parsons. The only reason. Otherwise, they'd have been mid again.
Yeah, but my thing with that mentality, and you're not wrong in saying that that's where the Cowboys are as an organization, is if you are going to have that mentality, you probably get your deals done early, right? You do your work ahead of time.
You would think.
And I think the biggest reason why Florio has space to propose, maybe they should draft a quarterback, or we have space to have these conversations relatively reasonably, is because they've not done their work ahead of time and putting their house in order to make sure that you have the quarterback that you claim to believe in and claim to want. And, you haven't locked him up on his contract and figured yourself out. And I think that's the issue.
Here's what I'm thinking. I was listening to Florio talk about it, and he's telling the truth about how they won't pay their big money players until they have to, and they always overplay their hand. I truly believe it's going to come back down to the same thing again, and Dak's going to say, give me my money, and they're going to give it to him. Jerry always says deadlines make deal. He's trying to count on that again for some kind of reason that we won't have to pay Dak as much. It don't work that way with quarterbacks. They always get more money every freaking year, no matter who they are. Kyler Murray, no matter who they are. Quarterback in Jacksonville, no matter who they are. Name them. They always get their money. He knows Dak does all these other things right. If you say Dak had a poor season, he's still going to give him his money. I'm telling you. Because in other words, he has no backup plan, because in his mind, it's going to be Dak. It's just about, what do I want to pay him?
Yeah, and losing these deals also compounds, because then you have a bad deal that you're adding money, you're dealing with that money. Because that's some of the things that they're trying to deal with, the payroll of years past, but you're compounding upon that by doing more waiting.
It's crazy. That's why CD or Mike is going to get franchise tags, because they're not doing these big deals right.